Welcome to Thursday Bible Study. I'm Pastor J.P. O'Connor. I'm lead pastor here at West Covina Hills Seventh-day Adventist Church. And this is Pastor Jillian Lutz, who's our associate pastor. And we are thrilled to be with you again, going through the book of 1 Samuel. And it's been really tight on David, and he's been going through some stressful situations, but he's also gathering around himself the people that will be the core of his government in the future. So through this challenge, he's really building the future of who Israel will be and what kind of a king he will be. So let's not waste any time. We'll dig right into the Bible. And Pastor Jillian, would you pray for us to get us started?
Sure. Lord, today we get to go through a story about one of your great women. I pray, Lord, that as Pastor JP does this study with us, that you will pull out of it the things that we most need to hear. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. At the end of chapter 24, David gets a respite because he has convinced King Saul that he's not really his enemy. He spared his life, even though he had him in his hand and could have killed him in the cave. He does not kill Saul and sets him free and then confronts him about it. And in the end, King Saul recognizes that David has treated him kindly, and he sends the army home and he backs off. So what does David do now with his free time? First, maybe some bad news for David as chapter 25 begins. Samuel died, and the Israelites gathered together and lamented for him, and they buried him in his home in Ramah, and David arose and went down to the wilderness of Paran. Now, David is not ready to be out in the open yet. He's not going to this funeral. He goes in the opposite direction. He goes to the wilderness of Paran. He needs a place to keep his people safe, and he's not ready. He wanted to. I feel like he would have wanted to be there for Samuel's funeral, but he can't. His life is still in danger, even though Saul is backed off. He's still in hiding. He's a man on the run.
This is also one of those rare moments in the Bible where it's following the hero's journey cycle. The death of the mentor is a key part in the hero's journey because the hero can't fully realize their destiny until they have those safety cords cut off. And so with his mentor no longer around, now is where we finally start seeing who David is going to be without the living reminder of his mentor around.
Verse 2 says, Now there was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel, and the man was very rich. He had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he was sharing his sheep in Carmel. The name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife Abigail, and she was a woman of good understanding and beautiful of appearance. But the man was harsh and evil in his doings. He was of the house of Caleb. That's just really disappointing. Why do they have to throw Caleb under the bus here?
Right?
You know, Caleb was awesome.
If you weren't with us last year, we spent a lot of time in the book of Joshua and Judges talking about how cool Caleb was.
Yeah, he's like one of my heroes of the Bible. You know, this is not the way you want to be remembered, is that one of your children turns out to be a total psychopath. He was evil in all of his doings. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Verse 4. So David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was sharing his sheep. David sent 10 young men, and David told the young men to say, Go up to Carmel, go to Nabal, greet him in my name, and thus you shall say to him who lives in prosperity, Peace be with you, and peace to your house, peace to all that you have. Now I've heard that you have shearers, and that your shepherds were with us. We did not hurt them, nor was there anything missing from them the whole while we were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore let my young men find favor in your eyes, for we come on a feast day. Please give whatever comes to your hand to your servants and to your son David. So David's begging.
Yeah.
He has a lot of mouths to feed. It's a feast day in Israel. And he doesn't have a lot. I'm getting the feeling he doesn't have a lot to hand out. God is providing for them. This is really interesting. He has hundreds of people that are with him. They're in the wilderness. You're assuming that they do some hunting. You assume that they do some trading. but they're surviving in the wilderness. They don't have houses, probably living in tents, living in caves, and trying to survive. And it's a
Yeah.
feast day, and David thinks, let me reach out to this wealthy landowner. Maybe he'll be kind to us on a feast day and give us some food. Now,
It's, and it was a part of the Levitical codes and things to be extra generous on feast days, to invite the poor and the Levite and anyone who couldn't provide for themselves to come and celebrate with you. It's kind of the equivalent of being all like, "Hey, it's Thanksgiving and my family's hungry. Can you help me out with a little something for a turkey?"
so, but Nabal is not that guy. Nabal doesn't care what the Old Testament says or what the law of David or the law of Moses says. He doesn't care.
I mean, even in secular America, you'd be considered cold-hearted if you have the means to not help a family have a good Thanksgiving meal, right?
Plenty of that happens, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if they ask you directly and you say no, it's even more rude. But how many families go without? And there are families that...
It's just considered really, really rude if someone reaches out to you
and ask for help.
For a good Christmas or a good Thanksgiving, and you deny it to them even though you had the means to do it.
It's pretty cold.
It's cold. It's really cold.
Especially if you have abundance.
Yeah.
Verse 9. So when David's young men came and spoke to Nabal, according to all these words, in the name of David, and waited, Nabal answered David's servants and said, "Who's David? And who is this son of Jesse? There are many servants nowadays who break away each one from his master. Shall I then take my bread and my water and my meat that I have killed for my shearers and give it to men who I don't even know? Where are they from?" Okay, so it's not that he's wrong. What do I mean by that? If you look at his arguments at face value, what he's saying is, why should I support this David when he has run away from his master Saul? So if he technically would be a supporter of Saul, you could understand why he wouldn't want to support David. But that's just an excuse. The issue here is that he is an evil character, that he doesn't want to give up his own and give it to somebody else. It looks like that he's given his shearers, the ones who are doing the work of shearing the sheep, that they have food and water and meat and bread, but he doesn't want to give it to anybody else. He's not going to go above and beyond. He's going to do the minimum. Verse 12. David's young men turned on their heels and went back, and they came and told him, David, all these words. And David said to his men, "Every man gird on his sword." So every man girded on his sword, and David also girded his sword. And about 400 men went with David, 200 stayed with supplies. Now you get an idea of how big his army is. 600 people to feed, especially men. I'm not saying that women aren't hard to feed too, but I'm just saying that of his group, he's got a lot of mouths to feed, and they can eat. They're warriors. He's in trouble, but he's mad. So I am going to say that he doesn't know himself, that he's mourning over the death of Samuel.
Yeah.
And he's just hurting inside. Maybe at a different point in time, he'd have the patience to deal with this, right?
Transferring his rage over from not being able to attend Samuel's funeral or whatever.
Or I'm in the desert because of Saul. He won't leave me alone.
Yeah.
And this guy is completely rude and shows his character. David doesn't go to have a conversation. They're putting their swords on. David's intention is to kill this man and everybody who supports him. They're all going to die. He's going to war against his own people with a sword because this guy has a bad attitude. Now, just in the last chapter, David showed mercy to his enemy and showed grace and did not put a finger on the Lord's anointed. Now, in the next chapter, you see David's losing his mind, and he's about to go and kill this man simply because he refused to give extra towards a feast.
I'm probably reading my own stuff into this, but might he be burnt out and therefore less himself?
Of course.
Between that emotionally exhausting conversation with Saul and the death of Samuel and the ongoing stress of feeding that many people. I recently read this book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, And a point that it brought up is, if you really want to know if you're burned out or not, how nasty are you to people? Okay? How easily irritable are you?
Preach it.
You know?
Attitude is everything.
Yeah.
And David goes from 0 to 100.
Mm-hmm.
There are steps here that David could have taken, if you want to process it that way. He could have been patient. He could have reached out, another emissary, and give a warning that, look, you know, what you did was hurtful. I don't want to take the next step. Be warned that if I have to come over there, you know, something, yeah, whatever. He could have sent the priest. He had people with him that could have negotiated. But he has simply just lost his mind, and he just wants to go and kill everybody. I mean, he wants to kill something or someone.
Don't we all feel that way sometimes? I used to make fun of that whole sentiment, but the older I get, the more I get it.
Yeah, you know, I always wonder, there's so many people that say, I never want to be a pastor. And I think to myself when I hear that, like, why did they think my job is so terrible? Like, I have one of the best jobs, I think, in the world.
It's an absolutely fantastic job.
Absolutely. Then there are days.
when,
and by the way, all those days have to do with people. There are days
some of mine just have to do with sheer volume and complexity of very detailed work.
Yeah, the really bad days have to do with people.
Yeah.
There are days when people will just drive you to the edge of your sanity. And I think that's what people think is the part of our job that they wouldn't want to have, you know?
Yeah,
I mean, isn't that they're really,
yeah.
they don't want to preach? Maybe they're afraid of being up front. I get that.
Do you remember that for a sizable portion of the population, public speaking is terrifying, and the fear of public speaking is more popular than the fear of death?
There are plenty of pastors, though, that public speaking doesn't have to be part of their job. I mean, there are associates that, you know, focus more on other things, administration, or maybe they're more focused on giving Bible studies or whatever. It doesn't matter. But I think that that's the reason why most people don't want to be a pastor, is because of the people, because of board meetings.
The complex leadership and relational challenges of it all.
So when I look at David here, I just realize that he's got a lot going on and he's losing it, and it's people, but it's a lot of different situations all piling up on him.
It's like Nabal is definitely being cold. He's being, you know, a bit of a word I won't use here, but David is just kind of transferring all of his rage from other things onto this one guy who is actually in front of him.
Who probably deserves it, but it shouldn't be at David's hand.
Yeah.
Verse 14. Now one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, "Look, David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master, and he reviled him." So there's more attitude that you cannot see in the words. The way that he spoke to those 10 young men that David sent was wicked. I mean, mean, nasty, sarcastic, hurtful, hateful. He
Either
reviled
that,
them.
or what we have here is an example of things slowly escalating more because some people just like to gossip and make things more tense. Give me the cheese, May.
So this is one of Nabal's servants
Going to Abigail,
running to Abigail afterwards because he knows what Nabal is, but he also knows that David is one of the generals of the army and kills thousands, right? You don't want to mess with that guy. Verse 15, the men were very good to us. There we go. And we were not hurt, nor did we miss anything as long as we accompanied them when we were in the fields. They were a wall, both by day and by night, all the time that we were with them, keeping the sheep. Now therefore know and consider what you will do, for harm is determined against our master and against all his household, for he is such a scoundrel that one cannot even speak to him. All right, so this servant is talking about Nabal, his master, pretty harshly.
Right.
But he's being very vulnerable with
Abigail.
Saying, if you don't do something because you're smart, then everybody's going to die, basically, is what he's saying. Because Nabal is such a scoundrel, and David, he even knows that harm is determined. When those 10 left, those 10 men sent by David, this servant knew that they were going to come back with swords. That's how bad it was. They knew. Verse 18, Abigail made haste, took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep already dressed, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 clusters of raisins, 200 cakes of figs, and loaded them on donkeys. And she said to her servants, P.S. Nabal doesn't even know that this is happening.
Nope.
There are plenty of stories in the Bible where the men are clueless. And this is just another one. He says I don't want to give you any extra. I already feed my servants. But he has so much food in abundance that he doesn't even notice that she's basically pillaging their resources, but it's a drop in the bucket for him.
Right.
Because he's not even aware that it's happening, that all that food is going out of his house. He probably wouldn't even know if it disappeared. And he doesn't, by the way. He will not know. But it's interesting.
And this is an interesting historical example of women who couldn't hold formal positions of power, very much exerting influence and authority behind the throne. And it's an interesting dynamic to watch at work because she does it so well here. It would be fascinating to see if she would be able to kick the habit if she were suddenly transported into a more gender equal society. That's just one of those odd and interesting things.
I think it's what's attractive to David is the leadership that she shows and how she handles the situation. She's political. She's smart, pretty too. That doesn't hurt.
That doesn't hurt.
But it certainly is what David is interested in. He knows he needs more than a pretty face. He needs somebody who can handle people.
Yeah.
And she handles the situation so well.
And do hardcore diplomacy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Verse 19, and she said to the servants, go before me. See, I'm coming after you. She did not tell her husband Nabal. So it was as she rode on the donkey, she went down under cover of the hill, and there was David and his men coming down towards her, and she met them. David said, surely in vain I have protected all that this fellow has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that belongs to him, and he's repaid me evil for good. May God do so and more also to the enemies of David, if I leave one male of all who belong to him by morning light. I mean, he's just steaming. Even as he's riding, his brain is just churning on, I'm going to kill them all, these people, look at all I did. P.S., by the way, I'd like to think of both sides of this.
Right.
David didn't have a contract with Nabal.
No.
And the fact that David protected his flocks, technically, if it's me, I would say, but I didn't ask you to do that.
Yeah.
Now I got to pay you for something that I didn't even ask for?
It's like those folks who wash your windows in a third world country and then ask for a tip.
Yeah. And it's like, I didn't ask you to wash my window, but, you did it anyway, right? So in my brain, as I'm churning all this, I think to myself, there's some communication that should have happened before this point. Some relationship building, some approach. David uses the festival, but he surprises Nabal, who has an evil character. So the surprise and his, what you get is who he is, all turns out to be very bad. But there are definitely ways David could have handled this situation with patience, with more diplomacy, that he could have handled the situation better also.
Now, something comes to mind here that it could very well be that Abigail was apprised of the situation and that she's been running Nabal's estate behind his back.
It's possible also that she's been doing that. Sure.
And Nabal himself is the figurehead and has no idea the actual state of his affairs.
The servant does come and tell Abigail all that he knows.
Yeah.
And he fills her in and apprises her of the situation, but it would seem maybe that she was not aware of how much David had done. Maybe they knew
maybe she was aware he was around in the hills, but not, yeah. Yeah.
Verse 23. Now when Abigail saw David, she dismounted quickly from the donkey, fell on her face before David, and bowed down to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, on me, my lord, on me let this iniquity be. Please let your maidservant speak in your ears and hear the words of your maidservant. Please let not my lord regard this scoundrel Nabal, my husband. For as his name is, so he is. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, your maidservant, did not see the young men of my lord whom you sent. Now therefore, my lord, as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, since the Lord has held you back from coming to bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hand. Now then, let your enemies and those who seek harm for my Lord be as Nabal. And now this present, which your maidservant has brought to my Lord, let it be given to the young men who follow my Lord. Please forgive the trespass of your maidservant, for the Lord will certainly make for my Lord an enduring house, because my Lord fights the battles of the Lord, and evil is not found in you throughout your days. Okay, she is eloquent. She is playing him like a flute. I mean, she's touching all the right buttons.
She's doing flattery without it coming off too strong. She is distancing herself. She's doing this interesting thing where she's establishing herself as someone who can speak for the household, even though she's not the actual main figurehead, which is a very bold move in this time and place.
But if he's such a scoundrel, the only way his household stays together is if someone is able to manage all the personalities.
Right.
And I think what she's saying is, had I known that you were going to come and approach us, I would have handled it from the beginning.
Right.
But you found my husband.
Yeah.
Which, you know, he shouldn't have been involved in it, because he's no good. He's a scoundrel. He's a fool. Folly is his name. But even, you know, she is telling him in a kind, gentle way that he's wrong.
Yeah, she doesn't come out and say, "You're wrong, David." No, she eases him into it.
As she praises him. Like, you know, I'm so glad that, you know, we stopped you from avenging yourself. Because that would have been wrong.
Right.
You don't avenge yourself. You let God be the vengeance. You don't decide who gets slaughtered or killed. You trust in the Lord. I mean, she's spiritually speaking to him, saying, you shouldn't be here with your sword, but we were wrong, you know, for rejecting you, and it's my fault, because as basically as the leader of this clan, I should have met you and taken care of your business. So verse 29, yet a man had arisen to pursue you and seek your life, but the life of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living with the Lord your God, and the lives of your enemies he shall sling out as from the pocket of a sling. And it shall come to pass when my Lord has done for all my Lord according to all the good that he's spoken concerning you, and has appointed you ruler over Israel, that this will be no grief to you, no offense of heart to my Lord, either that you have shed blood without cause, or that my Lord has avenged himself. But when the Lord has dealt well with my Lord, then remember your maidservant. She's smooth.
She's so smooth.
She's smooth. I mean, just the way she's putting these words out. She's like, look, when you're ruler, this is going to seem like nothing. Don't let this bother you. You're about to be king, and you're going to deal with this, you know, scoundrel, this fool, this man named Nabal. She basically says it's good that God stopped you. You know, he doesn't want you to pull out the sling. And
it's so brilliant that she uses a metaphor that's tied to his victory over Goliath. You know, she's basically saying that the rest of your enemies will be like Goliath, by saying, you know, the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling.
So, and she's reminding him that when he is righteous, that God gives him the victory, that it's God who gives him the victory, and that him taking this vengeance to himself would not be the right course of action. Then she says something interesting. When all this is over, remember me, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, she's basically saying, some point in the future, you're going to get to that better place. Remember me when you get there.
Yeah.
You know, please. Now, when she says remember me, she's not saying it in a sexual way or like a flirty way, like I want to be your wife. No, what she's saying is, so you're not carrying the guilt of getting your own vengeance on Nabal. Remember that I came out, that I helped you, and that I stopped you. Think of me kindly, basically, when you're king. I'm on your side, and I know that the Lord has anointed you. I'm with you, David.
The very shrewd thing she's doing here is, even though she's not head of household to be able to make an alliance with David, she's kind of doing it under the table. And it's brilliant.
It would seem to me that she does have the power.
She doesn't have the positional power.
Right.
She has the what some people call soft power, which is the relational power. But if you ask me, soft power is some of the strongest stuff out there.
Yeah, 100%. She's definitely the one that's running things. The servants come to her. She's the one that has power over what he has. He has no clue. He doesn't have. He doesn't care.
Yeah.
He just wants to be mean to people. Verse 32. Then David said to Abigail, "Blessed is the Lord God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me." I think he recognizes that it wasn't Abigail, it was God diverting his actions. He understands at this moment that he was wrong, and he blesses God.
It may have been about to have a Saul moment.
Yeah, absolutely, and would have been rebuked or would have had to pay penance, or somebody would have suffered for his action. And blessed is your advice, and blessed are you, because you kept me this day from coming to bloodshed and from avenging myself with my own hand. For indeed, as the Lord God of Israel lives, who has kept me back from hurting you, unless you had hurried and come to meet me, surely by morning light no males would have been left to Nabal. So David received from her hand what she had brought to him, and he said to her, "Go up in peace to your house. See, I've heeded your voice and respected your person." I like this about David. David hears people. And even if it's criticism about himself, he's willing to hear that, and he's willing to respond in a positive way and say, "Thank you so much for catching me. Thank you for making sure that I don't make a big mistake that would hurt my reputation or God's reputation. I really appreciate you." Whereas a proud man would say, "Get out of the way, woman. Who are you to tell me I'm going to take this food and I'm going to go to the house and kill everybody and take what's in the house too." So, but David's not like that. David has the heart after God, which is a beautiful thing.
What you brought up there's going to be a story in 2 Samuel where David receives some criticism that really is too harsh. And what's interesting about that whole thing is that even that he doesn't lash out about in the moment. He just sort of stews on it, and on his deathbed talking to Solomon later on says, "Hey, if this guy gets a bit out of line, do this to him."
Yeah.
It's like he doesn't
Finish the job.
Yeah. It's the most curious thing. He doesn't crush dissidents, perhaps because he sees, the fact that he himself is technically a dissident.
And he didn't ask for the kingdom.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the youngest son of Jesse. I mean, nobody knows him. It's God who chooses him, who finds him. So, I mean, he's not trying to take the kingdom for himself. God promised him the kingdom. He's just trusting that God will give it.
Yeah.
As long as he doesn't do what he's about to do here, which is take matters in his own hands and become a tyrant, which is what he could have been. Verse 36, now Abigail went to Nabal, and there he was, holding a feast in his house, like the feast of a king. And Nabal's heart was merry within. By the way, it is a feast day, right?
Yeah.
So he's feasting like a king. I mean, he has tons of food, servants. He was very drunk. And therefore she told him nothing, little or much, until morning light. He's partying all night long, okay? 37. So it was in the morning when the wine had gone from Nabal. So he is now clear-headed, sitting down after a day of partying. And his wife told him all these things that his heart... so it was in the morning when the wine had gone from Nabal and his wife had told him all these things that his heart died within him and he became like a stone. So, did he really think there would be no consequence? I mean, does he think I'm just rich? I can just tell people off, or I can do whatever I want and I'll never suffer consequences for it? I mean, she basically says that there was a war band full of soldiers of the army who have killed thousands of people.
Yeah.
They were on their way to his house to kill him and all of his sons. To kill every male in his line. And she tells him this, and the Bible says that his heart becomes like stone. I think that simply means that it becomes dumbstruck. He just kind of realizes, like, I should be dead. I really screwed up.
I'm no doctor, but what this kind of sounds like is CHF, coronary heart failure. Because unlike some heart attacks, it doesn't kill you instantly, but it immobilizes you and sometimes kills you later. Because this would totally make sense.
There's definitely something physical here.
There's something
because
physical going on
verse
here.
38 says, and it
He
happened after 10
he
days.
became like a stone, and 10 days later he died.
The Lord struck him and he died.
Yeah.
And so the Bible is saying that it's a judgment of God against him for treating his anointed in a disrespectful way. But it could also be more than that. It can be just that he was an evil man. If you think that David is the only one he treated that way, you misunderstand. It's a character thing. This is the tone. I mean,
the fact that the servants went to Abigail instead of back to their master to go, excuse me, which, you know, someone who's wise and competent in their post will be willing to hear stuff like that from their servants as information. You know, sometimes I bring stuff like this to you and you hear it and we talk about it and we come to reasonable conclusions because, you know, we're actually a functional team.
Absolutely.
This guy is clearly not a team player, and there are people running stuff behind his back because they're afraid of him and they don't trust him.
Verse 39. So when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Blessed be..." Okay. There have been a few times in my life where somebody has passed and I have thought, "Blessed be the Lord." But I don't know if I can be so bold as David to make it public. But he's praising God that he's dead. "Blessed be the Lord who has pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal and has kept his servant from evil. For the Lord returned the wickedness of Nabal upon his own head." He sees it as a judgment of God. And he's saying, "God, thank you for keeping my hand from doing evil, and thank you for looking out for me and doing to this man what he deserved. His wickedness was returned on his head. You were the judge, God."
The one time I felt that way was when Bin Laden was finally brought down.
Yeah, that was, you know, that was a stressful time, wasn't it? Worry about more bombings or more planes, or it was just a scary
It was
time.
a far more, you know, like animated villain degree of evil than is presented here with Nabal, you know.
Yeah.
I was just trying to explain September 11 to one of my baptismal studies earlier today, and she was all like, "They mentioned this in school, but they never said it was that bad." And I'm like, "Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was bad.
Everyone my age can tell you how traumatizing it was to see all this stuff in the newspapers."
And nobody really knew what it was. I mean, they took some responsibility for it. Anyway.
Rabbit trails.
David sent and proposed to Abigail to take her as his wife. He's dead, and David reaches out to Abigail and says, "Hey, let's get married." When the servants of David had come to Abigail at Carmel, they spoke to her, saying, "David sent us to you to ask you to become his wife." She rose and bowed her face to the earth and said, "Here is your maidservant, a servant to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord." So Abigail rose in haste and rode a donkey, attended by 5 of her maidens. She followed the messengers of David and became his wife. So David also took Ahinoam of Jezreel, and so both of them were his wives. But Saul had given Michal, his daughter, David's wife, to Palti, the son of Laish, who was from Gallim. So David has 2 wives now, but the wife that he should have had, Michal's not his wife. He's somebody else's wife.
Technically, she still is, and there's going to be some high drama regarding this a few chapters from now.
Yeah.
High drama. Very high drama.
Because David feels like she belongs to him. She was promised to him. They got married, and this is wrong. But Saul doesn't want her to be David's wife, so it's complicated. I kind of feel like, is this really Michal's fault? I mean, does she have to be the one that suffers for this feud between Saul and David? But she gets caught in the middle because she's a daughter of Saul. P.S. Don't you think she could have escaped and joined David's band if she really wanted to?
Right?
Could she have found her husband and chosen to stay with him?
I mentioned this in a sermon a couple of months ago, but I really do think that she absolutely loved him when he was this handsome up-and-coming musician, but just couldn't hack the wilderness lifestyle and just didn't love him that much. You know?
Or she loved her dad more?
Also possible.
I don't know.
Now, what's interesting about that is that there are some commentators who say that Ahinoam of Jezreel, who he marries here, is from the house of Saul and possibly even one of Saul's own concubines. which that's a whole interesting side thing if it's true. But looking at Ahinoam, not Ahinoam, at Abigail here, I used to kind of have this thing where I was all like, hey, is Abigail David finally experiencing something resembling true love? Because let's face it, Michael was a bit of a political marriage and all of this. And, there's actual signs of attraction here and little sparks here going. But even though I like to be a little romantic about it and think of it that way, the odds are probably higher that it was actually David's responsibility to do this because he killed her husband, and now she has, no one to. David is doing a very smart offer here, just sort of looking at each other like, I'd be surprisingly good for you. Wow, you didn't get that reference. Anyway, Anyway, so David is making a smart political move here because he sees that Abigail is someone he can trust, someone who's wise, who will strengthen his claim to the throne, and he won't have this independent, wealthy widow on the edges of his land potentially causing problems. He sees that being married to her will be a far easier situation politically down the road than not. Now, it's also possible that he actually had an attraction to her. I mean, the Bible does mention she's beautiful, too.
He has multiple wives now, which is going to continue to be a theme in David's life. It would seem that he has a weakness in this area. I don't know if it's political marriages. I don't know if it's
or if it's a little bit of both.
It can be both.
He likes, he likes Michael because she likes him first. He likes Abigail because she's smart. He likes Ahinoam because Ahinoam helps him achieve his goals. And Bathsheba, well, we don't talk about Bathsheba, but we all know what David was into there.
But he's on his journey, he's on his path, and we see that he's learning lessons about leadership, about what is right, what is wrong, and he's gathering people around him that are going to help him to emotionally traverse this difficult time that he's in. Now he has the support of a woman who's smart, who will help him, who will tell him if he's wrong. And he is building around him not only soldiers, not only men, but also now he's building his family and his future. And, we'll just continue to see how David survives this tumultuous time that he's in. Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, thank you for the lessons that we heard today. Help us, Father, to be more like you. Help us to not take vengeance in our own hand. Help us, Lord, to be merciful and kind and generous to others. Help us to treat people like they don't deserve. And Lord, we pray that those who abuse us, those who hurt us, I pray, Lord, that you would take the bloodshed out of our hands. And I pray, Lord, that you would bring about justice for us, that you would bring upon their own heads those who wish to do us harm. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.